7 things Christians shouldn't do at Christmas. This is not what Jesus wanted. Have you ever reached the middle of the Christmas season, looked around at the lights, the music, the shopping bags, the endless schedules, and quietly felt something was missing, even though everything looked perfect on the outside? You might be surrounded by decorations, surrounded by people, surrounded by activities, yet inside there is a strange emptiness that you cannot fully explain. Christmas was supposed to feel warm, meaningful, and deeply spiritual, but instead it sometimes feels rushed, pressured, and strangely exhausting. Many believers experience this but rarely talk about it, because admitting it almost feels like admitting failure. We tell ourselves that being busy is normal, that spending more means loving more, that doing more traditions means honouring the season more. But deep down we wonder if we're slowly drifting away from the very heart of what we claim to celebrate. Christmas is not just another holiday on the calendar. For Christians, it represents the moment when hope entered a broken world in the form of a child. Yet somewhere between advertisements, expectations, and social pressure, the focus can quietly shift without us noticing. We do not wake up one morning and decide to ignore Jesus. It happens gradually. A little less prayer here, a little more comparison there, a little more stress, a little less reflection, until the celebration becomes louder while the meaning becomes quieter. The tragedy is not that we celebrate too much, but that we sometimes celebrate everything, except the reason the season exists in the first place. You might be a sincere believer who truly loves God, attends church, and wants to honour Christ, yet still finds yourself caught in habits that do not reflect his heart. This is not about guilt or condemnation. It is about awareness. It is about gently asking ourselves honest questions. Are we celebrating Christ, or are we celebrating an image of Christmas that culture has shaped for us? Are we drawing closer to him during this season, or are we simply getting busier? These are not accusations, they are invitations. Because when we pause and realign our focus, Christmas can transform from a stressful obligation into a powerful spiritual renewal that touches not only our homes, but our hearts. When giving gifts replaces giving love. Have you ever stood in a store holding an item in your hand, wondering if it was expensive enough to prove how much you care? Many of us have been there, feeling a quiet pressure that love must be measured in currency, that the size of a box somehow reflects the size of our heart. Christmas shopping can slowly turn into an emotional scoreboard where we compare what we give with what others give, and without realizing it, generosity becomes performance. Yet love was never meant to be weighed on a receipt. Love is presence, attention, patience, and sincere listening. A simple conversation where someone feels truly heard can carry more spiritual weight than the most luxurious present. The birth of Christ itself reminds us that heaven's greatest gift arrived in humility, not extravagance. There were no shining palaces, no grand ceremonies, no expensive offerings. There was a quiet stable and a message that true value does not depend on outward appearance. When we allow gifts to replace genuine connection, we risk creating beautiful moments on the surface while leaving hearts untouched underneath. It is not wrong to give, it is not wrong to celebrate with generosity, but it becomes misplaced when giving turns into obligation or fear of judgment. A heartfelt letter, a prayer spoken over someone, or a shared meal filled with sincere conversation often communicates love more deeply than objects ever could. Christmas invites us to remember that affection cannot be purchased, and presents cannot be wrapped in paper. When we shift our focus from impressing people to genuinely blessing them, giving becomes an act of grace instead of a test of worth. When busyness silences spiritual listening, have you noticed how the days leading up to Christmas can feel like a race that never slows down? Calendars fill quickly, invitations overlap, errands multiply, and before long, every hour is accounted for. In the middle of all this movement, silence becomes rare, and spiritual awareness begins to fade quietly. We often assume that doing more for the season means honouring it more, but activity without reflection can gradually push God to the background. A full schedule can create the illusion of productivity while leaving no space for inner renewal. The heart needs stillness the same way the body needs rest, yet many believers enter Christmas spiritually tired because they never pause long enough to listen. Scripture often shows that divine clarity comes during moments of quiet attentiveness, not constant motion. Stillness is not laziness, It is intentional awareness. When we remove every quiet moment from our day, we unintentionally remove the environment where spiritual sensitivity grows. This does not mean abandoning responsibilities or ignoring family gatherings. It means creating small intentional pauses where the noise fades and reflection returns. Even a few minutes of calm prayer, reading a passage slowly, or sitting in gratitude without distraction can restore clarity. Christmas loses its spiritual depth when it becomes only a checklist of tasks. But when we allow space for silence, the season regains its meaning. In quiet moments we remember why we celebrate, whom we celebrate, and how deeply we are loved. Silence is not emptiness. It is often the doorway through which understanding gently enters. When traditions overshadow truth. Have you ever found yourself defending a Christmas tradition so strongly that you almost forgot why it existed in the first place? Traditions are powerful because they carry memories, emotions, and a sense of belonging. The songs we sing, the meals we prepare, the decorations we bring out every year all connect us to family history and personal nostalgia. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, traditions can be beautiful reminders of faith when they point us toward deeper meaning. The problem begins when the tradition itself becomes the focus and the truth it was meant to highlight slowly fades into the background. We can become so protective of customs that we forget their purpose was never the ritual itself but the message behind it. Sometimes people argue more passionately about how Christmas should be celebrated than about the spiritual message of Christ's birth. We might insist on certain dates, certain foods, certain songs, or certain formats, believing that preserving them is equal to preserving faith. Yet faith is not sustained by repetition alone, it is sustained by understanding. A tradition without reflection becomes habit, and habit without meaning becomes empty motion. The heart of Christmas is not in the structure of celebration, but in the substance of remembrance. When we pause to explain why we do what we do, when we connect symbols to their spiritual significance, traditions regain their power instead of losing it. Flexibility does not destroy faith. It often strengthens it because it shifts attention back to truth rather than form. Christmas is not threatened by new expressions of worship or different family practices. What truly weakens the season is when we cling to methods while neglecting the message they were designed to communicate. When consumption replaces compassion. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to spend more on comfort for ourselves than on kindness for others during the holidays? The season encourages generosity, yet it also surrounds us with constant invitations to buy more, upgrade more, and indulge more. Advertisements tell us that happiness can be purchased and that satisfaction is just one more item away. Without realizing it, the spirit of giving can slowly transform into the habit of consuming. We convince ourselves that we deserve extra treats because it is a special time of year, and while there is nothing inherently wrong with enjoyment, imbalance quietly grows when compassion becomes secondary to convenience. The message of Christ's arrival into the world carried a strong theme of care for the overlooked, the poor, and the forgotten. Compassion is not measured by the size of donations, but by the sincerity of concern. A small act done with genuine empathy carries spiritual weight far beyond its material value. Visiting someone who feels alone, offering encouragement to a struggling friend, or quietly helping a family in need often leaves a deeper impact than any decoration or purchase ever could. Christmas loses part of its soul when generosity is limited to people who can repay us socially or emotionally. True compassion moves beyond comfort zones and seeks opportunities to bless without expecting recognition. The season becomes spiritually alive again when kindness is intentional rather than accidental. When we choose to see the needs around us and respond with humility, Christmas shifts from being a time of accumulation to a time of meaningful contribution. And in that shift, the heart of the celebration begins to shine more clearly. When conflict overshadows forgiveness. Have you ever entered a Christmas gathering already feeling tense because of unresolved issues with someone you know will be there? The season that speaks so much about peace can quietly become a stage for hidden resentment, polite distance, or silent judgment. Smiles are exchanged, gifts are handed over, but beneath the surface, old wounds remain untouched. Many believers carry emotional baggage into Christmas without realizing how heavily it affects the atmosphere of their hearts. We convince ourselves that avoiding confrontation is the same as maintaining peace, Yet avoidance often preserves bitterness rather than healing it. True peace is not simply the absence of arguments, it is the presence of grace and the willingness to release what has been weighing us down. Forgiveness does not mean pretending that hurt never happened, and it certainly does not mean accepting harmful behaviour without boundaries. Instead, it is an internal decision to stop allowing past pain to control present joy. Christmas offers a meaningful opportunity to soften hardened feelings, not through forced reconciliation, but through sincere intention. Sometimes forgiveness begins with a quiet prayer rather than a direct conversation. Sometimes it is choosing not to replay the offence repeatedly in the mind. The act may be invisible to others, yet spiritually it is powerful. When conflict dominates the heart, the message of Christ's arrival becomes distant and abstract. But when forgiveness begins, even in small steps, the atmosphere within us changes. We start to experience a lighter spirit, clearer thoughts, and a deeper sense of peace that no decoration or celebration can create. The season becomes less about maintaining appearances and more about genuine restoration, and in that shift we rediscover why peace was such a central promise connected to the birth of Christ. When the story of Jesus becomes background noise. Have you ever realized that you can hear the Christmas story so many times that it starts to sound familiar but no longer feels personal? Familiarity has a strange power. It can comfort us, but it can also dull our awareness if we stop reflecting on what we hear. The narrative of Christ's birth is repeated every year through songs, sermons, and decorations, yet repetition alone does not guarantee understanding. It is possible to know the details of the story while missing its transforming meaning. The danger is not forgetting the story entirely. The greater danger is allowing it to fade into background noise while other seasonal elements take center stage. When the central message becomes secondary, the celebration slowly loses its spiritual depth. The birth of Jesus represents more than a historical moment. It carries the message of divine presence, humility, and hope entering human reality. When we reduce it to a yearly tradition or a symbolic theme, we unintentionally distance ourselves from its personal significance. Reflection revives what routine can weaken. Reading the account slowly, thinking about its meaning, or discussing how it connects to daily life can restore its impact. Christmas becomes spiritually alive again when the story moves from memory to meditation. It is not about hearing it more often, but about hearing it more deeply. When the narrative of Christ's arrival returns to the center of our attention, the season regains clarity and purpose. Instead of being surrounded by festive noise alone, we begin to experience quiet awe, renewed gratitude, and a sincere awareness that the heart of Christmas was never meant to be decoration, schedule, or habit, but a living reminder of hope meant to shape the way we think, love, and live.